Votes for U.S. Senate seats continue to be counted in Arizona as well as Nevada, and the Senate race in Georgia. It is now heading for a December runoff after neither candidate was able to win more than 50% of the vote. A lot to get into here, and here to discuss it is CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, as well as CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist Joel Payne. Good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Leslie, I'm going to start with you. Because it was predicted by some that voters would deliver a so-called red wave. That has not materialized. Do you think Republicans would have been better off setting lower expectations going into this?
It's not a wave or a sprinkle, maybe just a light mist. That may have worked better for all of us involved. But that's not the nature of politics. I would say some credit the Democrats with downplaying expectations. Republicans like to roar it into a high rumble and a boil. And a lot of that is about activating the voter base, getting people excited. And Joe would probably agree, when it comes down to those last 30 days, it really is about getting out the vote to see where all of that hard work is going to pay off. And are people engaged and excited in a midterm election? A couple of different things we learned. One, redistricting. A lot of Republicans were depending on redistricting to really shore up some of those Republican seats and bolster what we look like statewide. And I will tell you, the Democrats were much better on some of those areas that were softer, more of a toss-up area, and running them their way than Republicans were. So for all the dependency on redistricting, we don't know the final data, but that is not proving to be well. And I would say, if anything, on the positive side, Republicans showed an erosion of some traditional Democratic bases. Look at Florida, we can break that down, and certainly areas in the Latino vote. So there are some positives from Tuesday.
Joel, Democrats may say, hey, listen, it wasn't a wave, it was just a mist, to use another term to describe
all the weather terms.
Yeah, all the weather terms. But, you could also say, look, a win is a win. Democrats are losing control of the House. The Senate is far from certain. What does this mean when it comes to President Biden's agenda?
What an esoteric question. What does this mean? I mean, look, I think my friend Leslie makes some really great points. Big picture. I actually think it's a mixed decision for both sides, and I think it should lead to some soul searching on both sides. Look, I don't think that this means if you're a Democrat, you should double down on your most progressive, per se, and your most, kind of out of the mainstream ideas. Whether or not you agree with them, that does not mean that the country necessarily is giving you a mandate on that. And obviously, if you're a Republican, this is not a mandate to do what Kevin McCarthy told our colleague Bob Costa on election night, which is pursue investigations, whether it's Anthony Fauci, Hunter Biden, the DOJ, anyone who ever said a nice thing about Joe Biden, pursue an investigation, use the debt ceiling to hold hostage budget cuts. I mean, that's not a mandate for either of those things. I think probably what it's a mandate for is maybe some introspection about what the American people actually want right now. I think they want government to work. I think they want their lives to make more sense. I think they want to be less anxious and less angry, and they want their elected officials to stop stoking them. That's why I think President Biden's approach in his press conference yesterday, I think, was refreshing to a lot of people, because he actually did take a pretty bipartisan tact in that address. And I think you're going to maybe see a lot of Democrats maybe follow that lead.
And Leslie, I'm going to bring it back to you, because as Joel had mentioned with Kevin McCarthy, if he is elected speaker, how can he keep both moderate Republicans and his more right-wing caucus members satisfied in all this? It seems like there's such a divergence of opinions.
Speaking to my sources in House leadership, they feel that they put a tremendous McCarthy put a tremendous amount of time in task forces over a year ago, getting everyone's buy-in, socializing a lot of these ideas around, the Parent Bill of Rights, getting energy security, working through some of the inflation efforts that they want to move forward, and getting agreement, that consensus agreement. So they would say they are ready to start on day one. And their criticism would be versus the Democrats, who had to take a recess after their new win of a majority to figure out what they wanted to do. I think on that sense, they have some models to look at. If they look at the governors, I mentioned Parents' Bill of Rights, there's going to be, I think, general consensus among independents and among the conference. So it's to be seen, but that's where they want to go.
Joel, in the Senate, it's possible that control will once again come down to Georgia. I'm curious about your take on this runoff election. I don't know if any of the traditional factors that we sort of consider even make a difference. You know, the incumbent boost, or, you know, whether people are just so exhausted from the midterms they don't even want to come out and vote again. Whether or not Herschel Walker, you know, now he's going to be on the ballot by himself. He's not going to get perhaps a bump from a pretty popular Republican governor. How do you think things are going to play out here?
So a couple things. One, the Senate, the fate of who leads the Senate may not actually rest on Georgia, and I think that's something that a lot of Democrats and frankly a lot of Republicans are maybe starting to see as the votes tick in Nevada and Arizona, and as that tabulation continues this week. Georgia may be padding on that lead for Democrats, who already, of course, are in the leadership in the Senate. That said, I still think most Democrats want to be very bullish and go hard at Georgia because, one, it adds another vote of insulation. And in an era as a Democrat where Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema exist, you need that extra vote in many cases to be able to do some of the things that President Biden feels like are priorities. I'd also say, too, you know, this is a different runoff than we saw 2 years ago. It's a shorter runway period. It's about 5 weeks from Election Day as opposed to 10 weeks as it was 2 years ago. I am interested to see what the X factor of Donald Trump plays this time. He played an outsized role in reining on Republican hopes 2 years ago. I'll be very curious to see how Republicans in the state of Georgia and nationally deal with the Trump issue, the Trump challenge here, because whether or not the president wants to be, the President Trump rather, wants to be a help or a hindrance to Republicans, I think, frankly, is an open question.
And Leslie, I'm gonna turn that same question to you, because even if, let's say it does come down to Georgia, how do you see things playing out in that state, and how much of an impact it could make?
Well, the National Republican Senatorial Committee has already committed, to put its war chest behind Georgia. They realize how pivotal that's going to be, and it is to bolster, in many cases, a candidate that was not ideal for this state. I think there's a lot of reflection upon that now, and we're in it, right? To Joel's point, also that X factor, I would also add the holiday. Having run some of these efforts in December, these are really hard months to get people not to focus on their economic pocketbook, saving for the holidays, and joining family and just all the other things on their mind, but go out and save the Senate, for their party. So to have a voice, to be active, to be engaged, it's going to be really, I would also add, in communities of color, certainly African-American vote, Latino vote is going to be a big part of this in those outer suburbs and exurbs, and I'm hopeful that they put the resources and time into activating everyone in the state.
And Leslie, what about the other X factor that Joel brought up? Former President Donald Trump. It almost seems like, every 48 hours
we don't
or
want
so.
To talk about.
I know. Well, it almost seems like every 48 hours recently, his impact shifts and changes. Like the I don't know, the patience for him is ebbing and flowing sort of radically in the last couple of days or so.
Gosh, Anne-Marie, you asked the right questions, right? Thank you for that. With Trump, there's an exhausted factor, but there's a money factor. He raises a tremendous amount of money. Many would argue for himself.
Does he share that money, Leslie?
I was going to say for himself. Internally, there's a lot of hand wringing. Think about the number of phone calls that have gone in to try to slow down the pace of any big announcements he's going to make. He's just stepping on a lot of the really strong momentum of the Republican effort statewide. But there's no accounting and predictor who could anticipate what the former president will do. What we can start to understand is how a lot of these voters who are really determining these elections on the margins are receiving that. And what we've seen in 2022 is they have no patience for those antics. So I think Republicans need to keep that in mind.
Interesting. Leslie and Joel, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.